Well, what would be helpful today?
Well, I figure we could finish what we were kind of talking about when I popped in last week.
Okay.
And then talk about process for election.
Okay.
Be good.
All right.
Trying to think if there's anything much new about it. I haven't been acutely affected by the same dynamic that's been going on as much, but seeing it affect other people is a thing I'm aware of. And so trying to figure out, I got the, okay, they're over there and Kirk and Joanna are doing their thing. But then when I hear other staff people say something along the lines of, I don't understand why that person's making those decisions, how to not sabotage somebody with any response.
All right. So it sounds like some people are asking for clarity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Between triangulating and asking for clarity, but the guy asking, I don't think actually, in a nice way, expects me to do anything about it. I think it's more just the voicing the frustration of it.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if it's triangulation. If I think he's already told Kirk his feelings about it, and there just hasn't been any management of that. And so I think at this point it might just be venting, but just makes me more aware of the same situation that I'm trying to leave over there, but keeps finding its way somewhere else.
All right. So, I mean, what do you think about somebody coming forward and venting something that you have probably more knowledge about than they do? You know, the dynamics more than they do. But I guess you're not free to share more.
What I'm worried about sharing, like, is this particular individual, the whole deacon thing doesn't really mean anything to him.
Okay.
And so, most of the time when he talks about it, and I think we have a fairly solid understanding, is he's venting, and then I'll say something along the lines of, like, it's confusing because Joanna's a deacon, and, like, we want to respect that. And you're also right, there could really be more clarity among them as staff and who has what role. And I just try to leave it at that, and the rest is listening. He hadn't brought it up so close to staff meeting before until yesterday, which was, he had, it sounds so stupid talking about it, but there was supposed to be a meeting about people who help with our contemporary worship service, because they're going to be making changes to that. And when it started, I knew I wanted to meet with them because I knew who they were, and then that's mostly the point of it. And that turned into Joanna driving this meeting that was supposed to have all these people that help with it, but then one person couldn't come. And when that email came in by staff meeting, Joanna had rescheduled the whole thing. And so it's one of those Kirk, George, and I, who are all supposed to be in this meeting and are all in the email loop for this thing, none of us knew why it got rescheduled. Which on one hand I could care less about, because you just tell me when to show up and I'll show up for it. On the other hand, it's like, why did Joanna make that call? And not feeling equipped to be like, Joanna, why'd you make that call in front of everybody?
Mm-hmm.
And so George was commenting on that while Kirk and I were still in the room. And then Kirk kind of had this face of like, yeah, it's annoying, and then just left. And so then I got to listen to George a little more. But I don't want to, I'm very aware, and perhaps too much, that I might come across like I'm sabotaging Kirk or talking bad about him in some way based on how he's handling Joanna. I'm not really concerned if there was conflict between Joanna and I, because I feel like that's inevitable at some point. And so if that even sounds healthy or right.
Yeah. Well, you tell me. I mean, conflict can have its creative energy, but I'm not sure you're talking about that kind of.
No, I don't. I don't mean it like I'm looking for conflict with her, but I just feel like the dynamic of Joanne and I having conflict is different than Kirk and I having conflict, and the nature of it would be, I don't think there's as likely to be a sabotage feel to it with Joanna, because we're kind of on a different plane than.
And would the communication, just checking this out.
Sure.
Would you say the communication is more direct between you and Joanna than between you and Kirk?
Yes, because Kirk, I feel like, very rarely have I seen him be direct, and if him and I have a conversation, like I think he would trust me and I trust him when he has things to say, but I also know that how he is with me is different than how he is with everyone else, and how he talks about what we've talked about with other people, and when it's supposed to happen. It sounds different with them than it does with me, which could be a compliment to me. He trusts me enough that he can actually, say ABC to me when it's ABC. It doesn't feel like he needs to change for other people.
Okay.
But I also know that he has a tendency, even if I'm hyper aware and seeing it in little things, to make sure he's protecting himself when he's saying things to other folks. So all of that is floating in the back of my head when I think about if I'm openly questioning what Kirk is doing, other staff could see, okay, well, Sean and Kirk aren't on the same page, and then different people's insecurities could be in play with that, and how that could get lived out. Versus if Joanna and I are on the same page, I think that's more looked at as, okay, the guy doing discipleship and the person doing missions are on the same page, which is different than our lead pastor and our associate pastor on the same page. And why it seems to change like that in my head, I don't know. That's probably something to work out, but that's the feel I get to it.
Okay. So, I guess, my overall question is, what do you think needs to occur, and how can you help facilitate that?
Some kind of, the problem is I feel like I've said this till it's blue in the face and hasn't done anything. Even if there was like a simple staff retreat, it's just, here's what we do, and just naming Joanna's a deacon. That's why she's in worship. That's why she gets involved in worship planning sometimes. Whether or not, or saying Joanna's a deacon, that's why we have her as present in worship, but the worship planning that role belongs to this person.
Mm-hmm.
That would be really helpful. Because then it's one of those things where even if you disagree with it, you've been told what it is. And most of the folks on the staff seem pretty good, understanding that they won't agree with everything. They just want to know why something's happening. And George's line yesterday was just one of those, this is something that's probably always going to bother me because I don't know. And it bothers me that means this has been 3 years in. And if it's 3 years in, survey says that I'm not likely to initiate much of a change, at least anytime soon. And I also hesitate to continue to go back to Kirk and say, this is an issue, this is an issue, this is an issue. I don't know why I hesitate to do that other than I feel annoying. And I'm kind of annoyed by the inaction in the first place. It doesn't seem to be a viable direction to go in, if that makes sense.
Well, if you're, from what I hear, it sounds like you said, it's at least 3 years old, this dynamic. And I suspect that maybe not played out in the same way, goes back further than that. And I don't know if that's, just the three mixes of personalities, or it's Braddock Street.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are seeing yourself possibly as the agent of change or health in the system, it kind of means that you're going to have to think like a germ.
Okay.
All right, and be infectious. But also, at least in my experience, and observation of others, it means willingness to stand somewhat above the anxiety that it's going to cause, and not buy into it, other people's anxiety. Now, I don't know if you're ready or willing or equipped for that. You can decide that, not me. But
yeah,
I mean, that would just be yeah. So with that sort of as a cocktail napkin design, how would you flesh that out, you think? What does that give you, any avenues?
One of them is what I've, tried to do, is just state what Joanna's role is as a deacon and on staff, and then be like, that's why she does. Is coffee running at you?
It's trying to leak a little bit, I think.
That happens.
Let me get a napkin.
Sure. And that seems to work when people come to me, at least. Like, it does not placate folks, but they at least are understanding. Most times I've talked, I haven't had that many conversations. George and I have talked more because he's one of the staff people that reached out to Katie and I when we first got here and makes an effort to talk to us and stuff like that, which is appreciated. I also, it's a joy and a curse with our CPE stuff that I can't turn off well, what is George doing out of all of this? That's a different conversation. But I think he is legitimately confused as to why Joanne is doing what she's doing, and that it's emphasized by her personality. And so I find myself, when I'm trying to clarify things, almost ignoring the personality piece when I talk about it. Like, this is why Joanna is involved in what she's involved in. And if folks want to vent about the personality part, I just listen. And it's trying not to over-affirm that beyond, I understand why you would feel that way. Have you tried talking to Joanna about it? Most times they've tried talking to Joanna about it and it hasn't gone well. And then I have not felt comfortable going to Joanna with that feedback, because I know how I took it when she just came in the door and dumped stuff on me. And I don't know if it's conceited to say I'm pretty sure I'm more equipped to handle anxiety than she is right now. And so I imagine it would not go well if I were to try and do that back, even if it seems like that's fair, that if you give feedback in one way, you should be able to receive it the same way. Is that just a blind assumption? Is there any truth in that?
I don't know.
I think I just end up with my wheels spinning in place a lot of the time. And when I first started coming, I talked about how I can overthink and overanalyze sometimes. But it's hard with all the dynamics. Like, when you watch all the triangles spinning, it's hard not to just stare at the kaleidoscope versus being able to pull out what you can change. And right now I think I'm just thankful that I know I'm not in the kaleidoscope. I'm just looking through it. So it's really hard at times to do what I feel like is the professional thing, which is to not engage in any of the personality part of things, but also to be the agent of change. Means that I feel like I kind of need to be willing to wrestle with that stuff and blah blah, be self-differentiated enough to help other people wrestle with it too. And I think that's just hard.
So, you know, I wonder if you're in your conversations with your staff folks, how would you go about being an observer of behaviors and being able to reflect those behaviors and behaviors in the moment, that kind of thing, and just be curious about them rather than saying, you know, Joanna, you seem to really be defensive and anxious right now.
Yeah.
With, you know, because that would, I think, would just magnify it.
Yeah.
But just to say, stop for a moment, if you know, giving her feedback and saying, is what I'm saying making you anxious?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that way you can, you know, it's not I know better than you, and you're pointing a finger. It's you're anxious right now, or you're angry right now.
That clearly would help the situation.
Yeah, but you know, perhaps to help her identify and claim what she's feeling.
That's would work, I think. I feel like I'm just having a conversation in my head when I try to say something. Like, there's another voice that's like, what about this? I was going to say was, I feel like that'll work one-on-one, and then we get into these group settings, and it's the same crap, if you will, which makes sense. I'm not going to change everyone's ways they react to things, much less in 4 months, maybe ever. The hope is that I have a healthy working relationship with everybody. The issue to me is the amount of times I work with more than one person at a time means it kind of needs to get worked on, and I'm not sure. Well, I think everybody on that staff knows they aren't perfect and knows like all of that basic stuff. That when those dynamics become in play, that they don't just fall back into those patterns. Sure. Which, again, it makes sense given everything that we're learning and everything I knew coming in here. I don't feel equipped to know what to say in those moments. For example, like when we're in staff meeting, there are things George has told me that he would want to say in staff meeting, and he does not say them in staff meeting. And it did not seem right to be like, hey George, what you thinking? Because I feel like that puts him on the spot and then magnifies his not having said something, and then also precludes that he's told me something and I know what it is, but I'm not saying it either. That's one example. Two is, I think expecting, and maybe that's unfair at this point, someone who is supposed to be the manager of the staff to be the one to call out these things, because it really, for a staff that twice now have been excited about a workshop focused on talking to millennials on your staff without having a joke or statement or anything about, hey, why don't you talk to the millennial on your staff? It's my favorite so far. That it's, for whatever reason, it's just like a lack of being equipped to actually talk to one another, and it's like, if we can just get through staff meeting, I don't have to deal with this person, except I do, but I don't, like, type thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of distancing.
Sure. Well, again, if you're thinking like a germ, all right, a germ can infect one cell at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think you start with the one-on-one conversations. Maybe they show up somehow, some way down the road in a staff meeting. But, you know, I guess what I'm hearing is you're feeling sort of, you have these observations and your own feelings about those observations, but you're not feeling you have the place or the empowerment to make those, to give voice to those.
Mm.
Am I correct?
I think so.
Okay.
And right now, taking a step back, I feel like if I was talking, not counseling, but talking to someone else I knew, I would want them to say something. But in the dynamic, I feel like for some reason I can't. And I don't think I've been explicitly told that. I don't, other than just I'm a new person and I'm significantly younger than everyone, and that's pointed out to me.
So how do you use that to your advantage?
That I can just be naive or come across like I'm just, this is weird. Why do we do this?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, you know, I guess to me, there's always a consequence for you or for me if I were in the situation of not saying something, of not giving voice to the observation.
It almost gives permission every time you don't.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm also much more likely to triangulate somebody else. Gosh, you know, if these jerks over here would just behave, you know, my job and your
It's
job
so
would be a
much
lot
easier.
easier. Yeah. So, you know, so trying to avoid that consequence.
If I were to ask, like, for example, I mean, I have a worship planning meeting with Kirk and Joanna today. Just be like, can someone remind me how we ended up in this spot where Joanna had to decide what the meeting was? Is that, I can't ask you if it's offensive because you're not her, but at least the train's going the right direction. Is that a kind of curious question, or is that still sounds biased in some way?
Well, I think you name it as a curiosity. See, I'm just curious how we got to this being the time and place that we had this meeting and how that was decided. I'm interested in knowing.
Yeah.
You know what that dynamic is.
And then I'm projecting what responses could be. So I'm trying to think of a question to come out of that. If it's just this person wasn't available, so I just made the decision. Why? Or next time could we make that decision as a team?
Yeah. So
Since
yeah,
we are
yeah.
a team.
Yeah. So, well, okay. I hear that. Sounds logical. I just wondered, you know, if maybe in the future we can share this decision making.
Mm-hmm. Just
Yeah. Just, you know, I don't think you have to be accusatory.
Right.
I think it just it illustrates observation, curiosity, wanting to know how these things get decided and made and all those kinds of things.
it's worth a shot.
Yeah.
See how it goes.
And that's the beauty of being the new kid.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what's going on around here. Yeah.
I've
I've only been here.
I'm stumbling in the
months.
dark without a
Yeah,
flashlight.
that's
yeah.
right.
Oh, man. It's funny when it simultaneously annoys the bejesus out of me, and yet there are a lot of opportunities to do that, and there are things I can ask in that way that other people can't do that.
So how do you think it could become less annoying to you?
I think the wanting to change other people part is that the part that annoys me isn't noticing that I'm young or that I'm new or that I'm relatively new to ministry. It's connecting those things to immediately meaning I have so much to learn and I'll be so much better at some point. The condescending part to it.
Okay.
That's what annoys me.
That's annoys you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I am ready and equipped for the next time it comes across that way to just point out, hey, I appreciate you understanding that I'm new to this, but please understand that this job isn't difficult because I'm young. It's a hard job, and my age, doesn't determine my ability. Just something like that, and seeing what happens from that, and if there's blowing it off or accepting it or whatever, I won't know until that ever comes up again. So that's just the piece that gets annoying. And I think it doubles in annoying coming from people who I don't feel like would be able to receive that kind of criticism. It seems, I don't know if hypocritical is the right word, because I don't think they realize that they're doing something that they wouldn't be able to handle themselves. And my assumption they would not be able to handle that kind of criticism is because, I haven't asked Kirk straight up, but the one time I asked Joanna, I was like, would you like constructive criticism on your sermon? It was like, taking a step back, like, just remember that I put all of myself into my sermon. And I wanted to be like, isn't that our job? Like, maybe not all of ourselves, you probably need to take a step back from that too, but the fact that I also get annoyed feeling like I'm supposed to be walking into this bright-eyed and like, oh, everyone here has so much to teach me. They do, but it just feels very like we have this shiny new toy over here and they would be so much better off if they just had our knowledge of things. That rubs me the wrong way, but I'm not sure if annoyed is the correct feeling or if it's something else on the wheel that floats under annoyed.
Let me try to reflect that back a little bit and just checking it out.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying that there are, Kirk, Joanna, others are putting some parameters around your experience because maybe of their own?
Yes.
That you're not getting the full experience?
I think they are in my moments in the car when I vent to myself about it, it's this feeling like I've been new before, I've been young before, so I know how you're feeling, and this is how you're feeling, and this is how I'm going to help you because I know you're feeling that way. It's like being stepped on 3 times without actually being asked for feedback.
So they're projecting their own experience and feelings
Yes.
onto you.
And the reason it's subtle, but I didn't even, the first time I noticed it was when, like, the words of, I know you're young, but you're going to, and I know this is overwhelming at times, but that's okay. It was one of those, like, I didn't tell you I was overwhelmed, and I didn't say I felt that way because I was young. It's just that knowing, like, it's coming straight at me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think, and that mostly comes from Kirk and Joanna. Joanna, I didn't think much of it when I first got there. When we had an intern over the summer, apparently the associate's supposed to be that person's learning partner. Understandably, given the dynamic of the summer, Joanna took on that role, but like really wants to be a mentor, really wants to mentor people. Kirk also, I think, wants to be a mentor, especially for younger clergy. And so it's almost, when you want that too badly, what does that mean? I don't know if they've ever asked that question. And
so could you tell them how you want to be mentored?
I could. I would like them to ask me before I lead off with that.
Well, maybe
But
they're not going to ask
I know
you.
they're not. They're probably not going to ask me, and so yes, I could easily offer up. Hey, since we've talked about this workshop, here's how I feel. And instead of being passive aggressive and saying like, "Well, gee, wish you'd ask someone on your staff," I can actually do something helping and say it that way. Damn it.
Yeah, being passive aggressive could be so satisfying. at
Right?
times.
Oh boy. Almost did it during staff yesterday, and then I let it go because God was smacking me in the back of the head.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, so looking at the bigger picture, you know, the formation of your ministry
Mhm.
and your identity as a pastor. It seems to me like you're desiring to be able to experience things for yourself and be able to reflect on things,
Mhm.
and perhaps others could be mentor to you,
Mhm.
to help you with the reflection on those kinds of things. It also sounds like and, I, and this is something maybe for you to reflect on.
Mhm.
It sounds like that when the older, more experienced people and staff are assuming that you're feeling something or you're experiencing something in some way, and it reminds them of their own experience with that dynamic,
Mhm.
that for whatever reason you're hesitant to say that's not how it is for me, or I'm experiencing this differently than you. Is
I think, as I'm reflecting on that, because in the moment I don't feel like I have a space to say that without talking over someone, which is a shared responsibility that I need to just say it anyways, even if I'm, yeah.
so here's the whole deal.
Right.
In trying to invite clarity among others, we have to be willing to give
Clarity on our side, and
Yeah,
not
on our
just
side.
sit and take something. Yeah.
Yeah. Just giving you something to think about.
You do that often, though. I will think about that one. Yeah.
I think you could do with that whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me, but.